A respected college lecturer and seemingly devoted wife, Ella Martins, harbored a dark secret behind the facade of academic excellence and marital bliss. When her businessman husband's growing distance drove her into the arms of her students, she manipulated 17 young men under her supervision into illicit affairs. But when one of them tried to expose her, she murdered him in cold blood, only to trigger an avalanche of buried secrets. What began as a scandal unraveled into a sinister network of corruption, abuse, and exploitation spanning universities, ministries, and global organizations. As the bodies fell and power shifted, unlikely heroes emerged, among them a supposedly dead student who returned for vengeance, and a disgraced investigator seeking justice. What they uncovered was not just a crime, but a generational conspiracy with roots deeper than anyone imagined. This is the chilling true crime-inspired tale of betrayal, silence, and the fight to break the cycle, the legacy of the circle. Welcome to Through Crime, your portal into the most chilling true crime cases, unsolved mysteries, and the darkest corners of criminal history. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video, and if you are new here, do well to hit the subscribe button. We dig deep into the facts, uncover shocking twists, and explore the theories that keep investigators and the world on edge. Stay back and enjoy. To outsiders, Dr. Ella Martins had it all. A tenured literature lecturer at West Hill College with accolades for her brilliance, a stately presence, and a loving husband, Tund Martins, a successful businessman who commuted daily from a nearby town. Their photos on social media painted the picture of marital bliss, vacations in Greece, anniversary dinners, and smiling selfies with their teenage daughter, Zara. But behind closed doors, cracks were growing. Tund's business kept him away more than it kept him present. Nights turned into weeks, and Ella found herself alone in a sprawling house filled with silence. Conversations dwindled to bank transfers and goodnight texts. Love, once burning, had become embers, barely alive, barely noticed. She tried to hold on. But loneliness is a predator. At first, it was innocent. A compliment here. A lingering eye contact there. Her final year supervises, young men eager to impress, vulnerable and naive, looked up to her. And Ella, starved of attention, began to look back. The first transgression was with Joseph, a charming 24-year-old student who idolized her intellect. One late evening, during project supervision, he kissed her. She didn't resist. What followed was a whirlwind. One became two, then three. By the end of the semester, Ella had covertly seduced 17 male students, all under her academic supervision. Her home became a revolving door. A temple of secrets disguised as academic mentoring. She used her authority and their desperation for grades as leverage. She wasn't in love. She was in control. But power, when built on sin, eventually crumbles. Kelvin Adeyemi was different. A quiet, calculating computer science student with an uncanny curiosity. He found out about Ella's relationship with one of his friends and saw an opportunity. Instead of turning away, he leaned in. He seduced the seductress. But he had a plan. He began recording their intimate moments. Photos, videos, even voice notes, conversations where she openly talked about manipulating students for her emotional survival. Then one day he made his move. He confronted Ella with the recordings and demanded 5 million Nigerian nairas or he'd leak the evidence to the college board, the press, and her husband. Ella was stunned, furious. Kelvin had turned the predator into prey. On the evening of March 22nd, Ella invited Kelvin to her house under the pretense of negotiation. She prepared dinner. They laughed. She poured wine. Hours passed. And then, when Kelvin least expected it, she struck. A blunt force trauma to the head. Repeated. Precise. Blood soaked the expensive Persian rug as Ella stood over the body, shaking, breathless, monstrous. She panicked, packed the body in a large garment bag, drove it to campus late at night, dragged it to his dorm room, set the scene to look like a violent robbery. But one thing betrayed her, the note. It was a part of Kelvin's plan. Hidden in his shoe, addressed to the college board, describing everything in case he went missing. And it had her name on it. At first, police suspected a break-in gone wrong. But when they discovered Kelvin's hidden flash drive tucked inside a wall socket, containing videos and messages implicating Dr. Ella Martins, the case shifted gears. Ella was arrested 2 days later in front of her class, handcuffed as her students gasped, cameras flashing. Her husband, Tund, filed for divorce that same week. Her daughter, Zara, changed her surname. But the story didn't end there. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a twisted web of academic abuse, sexual manipulation, and administrative failure. 17 students. One woman. Years of secrecy. But what chilled everyone was this. Kelvin wasn't acting alone. After Ella's arrest, anonymous emails began flooding the college administration. Recordings. Testimonies. Hidden camera footage. Turns out, Kelvin had created a group chat with 4 other students, all victims of Ella's manipulation. They had spent months gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to take her down. But none of them planned for Kelvin to die. The group was devastated. They turned over everything to police. They demanded justice, not just for themselves, but for the friend who died trying to expose the truth. Suddenly, public sympathy shifted. Ella, once a respected woman, became a national disgrace. The face of academic betrayal. The court charged her not just with first-degree murder, but abuse of power, sexual exploitation, and obstruction of justice. In court, Ella tried to plead temporary insanity, citing loneliness, marital neglect, and mental instability. Her lawyers painted her as a victim. But her recorded words echoed in the courtroom. I am their future. I decide what grade they get. I am the queen of this game. Those words destroyed her. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, Tund sat at the back of the courtroom, holding hands with Zara. Neither cried. Neither flinched. They just got up and left, like shutting a door they'd long stopped hoping would open again. Power without accountability is a ticking bomb. Love without loyalty is a hollow shell. And secrets, no matter how well hidden, always bleed to the surface. Ella's story is a chilling reminder that betrayal wears many faces. That the people we revere can become the monsters we fear. And that justice, though delayed, always finds a way. But the story doesn't end with Ella's imprisonment, because one of the 17 students is now missing. Last seen the day before Ella's trial began. And inside his locker, detectives found a note with just 3 chilling words. She wasn't alone. 23-year-old Deji Ajibola was one of the 17 students Ella had manipulated. A quiet, brilliant engineering major, he had been one of the earliest students to fall into her web. But after Ella's arrest, Deji became increasingly paranoid. He distanced himself from the remaining students in the victim's group. He stopped attending classes. His roommate said he barely ate or slept. And then, one rainy Thursday morning, Deji disappeared. No note. No goodbye. No sign of struggle. Gone. Detectives assumed he might have fled the country to escape the media frenzy, until they found the locker. Inside Deji's spiral notebook were pages of handwritten observations, theories, and questions. One name kept reappearing: Professor James Obasanya, a respected senior lecturer in the sociology department. Married. 2 children. Active in church. A man no one would suspect of wrongdoing. But Deji believed otherwise. His notes suggested that Ella hadn't acted alone, that Professor Obasanya was not just aware of Ella's affairs with the students, but had been blackmailing her, forcing her to continue the cycle in exchange for silence. In Deji's words, "I think she wanted to stop, but he wouldn't let her. He made her deeper in it. I saw them fight once after class. She was crying. He said, 'You don't get to back out now.'" Investigators reopened the case, this time looking into Professor Obasanya. What they found was damning. Multiple female students had requested supervision transfers away from him. A quiet payout made to a female student 3 years ago marked confidential settlement. A deleted email chain between him and Ella partially recovered, where she wrote, "This ends with Kelvin. No more." To which he replied, "It ends when I say it does." The picture was forming. Ella wasn't just a manipulator. She was also manipulated. A pawn and a queen. The deeper detectives dug, the more it seemed Deji had been working on something big before he vanished. He'd compiled a list titled "The Others." 7 names. All faculty members. All with connections to either Ella or students who had come forward with harassment complaints over the years, complaints that mysteriously went nowhere. At the bottom of the page, Deji had written in red ink, "There's a whole system here. Kelvin exposed the affair. I want to expose the network. But I think they're watching me." He had been terrified. And rightly so. A breakthrough came from CCTV footage at a downtown cafe, 3 days before Deji vanished. It showed him sitting across from Professor Obasanya, arguing. Obasanya appeared calm. Deji looked agitated. At one point, he slammed a USB stick on the table. The footage showed Obasanya picking it up, slipping it into his pocket. Deji left 5 minutes later. He was never seen again. When police raided Obasanya's office, they found the USB in a hidden drawer. Its contents? Horrific. Audio clips of faculty members joking about training vulnerable students. One video file, Ella crying, yelling at someone off camera, saying, "You said you'd protect me. You promised." The web of silence had been designed to protect far more than just Ella. West Hill College became a battlefield. The media storm was relentless. Parents pulled their children from the school. Protesters lined the gates demanding justice. A female student stood on the college gates with a placard that read, "I was one of them. You ignored me." 3 senior lecturers, including Obasanya, were suspended. An emergency audit of all sexual harassment cases from the past 10 years was initiated. 23 complaints. Only one ever made it to a hearing. The rest? Vanished into paper trails and whispers. But now, the whispers had grown teeth. Professor James Obisanya was arrested and charged with accessory to sexual exploitation, intimidation, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. In his confession, he admitted to using Ella for academic grooming. She had needs. I had leverage. It was mutually beneficial, he said with a smirk in the courtroom. But when asked about Deji's disappearance, his tone changed. I didn't kill him. I warned him. He didn't listen. Police searched everywhere, hostels, forests, hospitals, but Deji's body was never found. No sign of life. But then, something changed. 2 months after Abisanya's arrest, the lead investigator, Inspector Clara Mensa, received an anonymous email. Subject: You're not finished. Attached was a short video. It showed Deji, alive, in an unknown room, holding a copy of that same spiral notebook. He spoke directly into the camera. I had to disappear. There's more. Much more. And they won't stop. Abisanya was just a gatekeeper. I found the architect. She's still out there. The screen cut to black. And then a message flashed. Meet me at the Lion's Fountain. Midnight. Come alone. Ella is serving life in Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison. Abisanya is awaiting trial. And Deji, presumed dead, may be the last chance to dismantle a corrupt network that stretches far beyond West Hill College. But now, there's a new name whispered in the shadows. A female dean. Untouchable. Powerful. And Deji is hunting her. Dean Veronica Nwachukwu had been with West Hill College for over 22 years. A former professor turned administrative powerhouse, she was known for her grace, discipline, and philanthropic outreach. She spearheaded campaigns for safe campuses, publicly advocated for victims of gender-based violence, and was celebrated as one of the top 10 women changing Nigerian education. But Deji told a different story. She's the one who covered it all up, he said. But Abisanya, even the lecturers before them, they all answered to her. She didn't just ignore the complaints. She destroyed them. In 2013, a 19-year-old student named Ifeananya Okafor accused a faculty member of sexual assault. The case made it to the disciplinary board, but was thrown out due to lack of evidence. Ifeananya dropped out that same semester. Deji had found a deleted draft of her testimony in the college's internal database, hidden under a folder labeled Arch SV01. The SV? Silence Vault. Inside were files on dozens of student complaints, all marked as dismissed, inconclusive, or never officially recorded. The common denominator? Dean Veronica's digital signature. She hadn't just been hiding abuse. She'd been orchestrating the silencing process for over a decade. Deji connected with former students who had either dropped out or transferred mysteriously. One of them, a former law student named Fatima Bello, had relocated to Ghana after accusing 2 lecturers of harassment. Fatima revealed she was summoned to Dean Veronica's office in 2017. She didn't threaten me with violence, Fatima said. She threatened me with failure. She said I'd lose my scholarship, my recommendation letters, my visa applications. She said I could scream all I wanted, but no one would listen. So she left. Like many others. Veronica's weapon wasn't a gun. It was reputation, paperwork, and fear. Inspector Clara Mensah took the findings to the state prosecutor, but the moment she mentioned Dean Veronica's name, the mood changed. "Are you sure you want to go there?" he asked. "She knows people. Powerful people." But Clara had made up her mind. Too many names. Too many buried lives. Justice was incomplete. And then the pressure began. Her office was searched. An anonymous complaint accused her of misconduct. Her niece, a student at West Hill, received a mysterious call warning her to tell your aunt to back off before someone disappears again. But Clara didn't stop. Clara returned to Kurikiri prison to visit Ella Martins. She needed one final piece to connect the puzzle. Ella looked different, pale, broken, but with a fire that hadn't died. "I was never the mastermind," Ella admitted, her voice cold. "I was just useful. Disposable." Veronica knew how to find women like me. Women on the edge. She fed the loneliness. She made me feel seen. She said I could do what I wanted, as long as I gave her what she needed. What did she need? Claire asked. Control. And silence. With Deji's files, Fatima's testimony, Ella's confession, and internal evidence, Clara orchestrated a secret sting operation. She posed as a journalist from an international NGO, requesting a private interview with Dean Veronica under the guise of celebrating her humanitarian work. Hidden cameras, a wire, and a planted assistant posing as a student with a problematic complaint. And then it happened. Veronica leaned in, smiling. "Sweetheart, you don't need to ruin your life over one bad experience. These boys, they twist things. Trust me. I can make this go away. We just need to keep it quiet. For your own future." And that was it. The veil dropped. The footage aired nationwide. Public outrage erupted. Politicians distanced themselves. The college board suspended her within 24 hours. A formal inquiry was opened, and days later, Dean Veronica Nwachukwu was arrested on charges of conspiracy to suppress justice, aiding and abetting sexual exploitation, destruction of evidence, intimidation of witnesses, obstruction of legal process. Inside the courtroom, dozens of former students, some trembling, some angry, came forward to testify. The silence had been broken. Justice wasn't swift, but it was loud. West Hill College shut down for 6 months for a complete administrative overhaul. New leadership was appointed. Clara was awarded the National Order of Merit for courage in public service. Deji was offered witness protection and a chance to finish his degree abroad. But he refused. "I want to stay," he said, "because the system doesn't change when we run. It changes when we fight." He started an advocacy group called the Unburied Voices. And then, 3 weeks later, a new anonymous message arrived in Clara's inbox. It contained just one sentence. "You uncovered the queen, but the king is still playing the game." In a high-rise office in Abuja, a man closed his laptop after watching the news about Veronica's downfall. He sighed, picked up his phone, and dialed. "They've traced it all the way up," he said. A voice replied from the other end. "Then it's time we clean house again." For months, Inspector Clara Mensah had thought Dean Veronica was the final boss. But the cryptic email, "The king is still playing the game," kept her awake at night. She re-examined every file, every transfer, every cover-up that had been too clean. Every administrative shutdown and digital redaction that had preceded even Veronica's reign as dean. The pattern all pointed upward. To Dr. Odigwe, the man who had quietly resigned from West Hill just months before the Kelvin murder scandal broke and was immediately promoted to a federal appointment. A man who had chaired every internal review board that dismissed abuse complaints between 2009 and 2018. Deji Ajibala, still under protection, refused to stay silent. He began a digital exposé under a pseudonym, Sankofa Black, releasing documents Veronica never had access to, emails from Odigwe's tenure, notes from meetings where students were labeled risks, and files from a scholarship grooming program that never officially existed. It was one of these files that broke the internet. Scholar_004_A.pdf, a scanned contract allegedly signed by a 17-year-old female student, agreeing to mentor-based sponsorship in exchange for academic loyalty and discretion. At the bottom, signed by Dr. Odigwe. The country exploded. Protests reached the capital. The National Assembly was forced to respond. Education committees demanded an independent investigation. But just as the momentum built, a car exploded in Gwarinpa. The victim, Deputy Investigator Haruna Ojo, one of Clara's closest allies on the case. No suspects. No survivors. No evidence. Just a single note left on the windshield. The king protects his crown. Clara knew then, this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. Digging into Odigwe's past, Clara and her team uncovered a pattern of elevation by silence. In 2004, a female professor at his previous university went missing after accusing the faculty of running a shadow scholarship system. In 2007, 2 students from a special mentoring initiative were found dead in what was labeled a lover's suicide. In 2010, an anonymous complaint claimed that Odigwe used female students as leverage against powerful political sponsors. Each time, the case vanished. Witnesses disappeared. Evidence was discredited. He had climbed over the bodies of the forgotten. And now he ruled at the national level. Clara knew official channels were compromised. The federal investigation team had already been infiltrated. Every move she made was shadowed. So she did the unthinkable. She went to the press. She released everything: student testimonies, contracts, internal memos, emails, death threats, and Odigwe's signature across hidden files from West Hill's vault. She called for a citizen-led tribunal, rallying public defenders, human rights lawyers, and student bodies across universities. They called it the people versus power. And it worked. For a moment. 3 days later, Clara's home was raided under the guise of an anti-corruption sting. She was arrested on false charges of evidence tampering, bribery, and national defamation. Her badge was stripped. Her name dragged through government-aligned media. But what they didn't know, Clara had already sent a master file, everything, to a former West Hill student now working with BBC Africa Eye. And with it, she included video footage of Deji's final interview, one that hadn't aired yet. Kennedy said, "If you're watching this, it means Clara's been silenced." But the king didn't win. He only delayed the endgame. I left something behind. Something buried under the old lecture hall. Room B103. The truth waits there. The BBC video went viral. Room B103 was stormed by journalists and activists. Underneath the broken tile near the projector stand, they found a rusted box. Inside, a USB drive, a blood-stained ID card belonging to the first known victim from 2013, and a printed list titled The 41, with names of every student who had either disappeared, dropped out mysteriously, or died under suspicious circumstances in connection with the program. The final name on the list? Deji Ajibala, with a question mark next to it. While the country debated how far the rot had spread, an unexpected figure spoke from prison. Ella Martins released a handwritten letter through her lawyer, stating, "There are others, some still in power, some hiding in plain sight. I can give names, and I can testify." The world had vilified her, and perhaps rightly so. But now, she was the prosecution's most dangerous weapon. Because if Odigwe fell, so would ministers, judges, professors, and university officials across Nigeria. The King's Court would collapse. As protests roared in front of the Ministry of Education, a black SUV slipped into a secured compound in the capital. Inside it sat Odigwe, pale and cold. His phone buzzed. A message from an encrypted number. "They've turned Ella. She's ready to talk." Odigwe typed back one word. "Fix it." But outside, someone was already watching. From the rooftop across the street, a camera clicked quietly. Recording. And the man behind it? A familiar face. Scarred. But unmistakably, Kelvin. The truth about Kelvin's survival was darker than anyone guessed. The night of the stabbing, his body was rushed into the college clinic. The security footage conveniently cut out, doctored by Dean Veronica, who believed the scandal could still be controlled. But when she realized he was still breathing, she made a call. Not to the police. Not to a hospital. To Dr. Odigwe. And that's where the plan was born. They staged his death, issued a false death certificate, cremated a body that wasn't his, a John Doe from the morgue, and flew him out of the country under sedation. He awoke 72 hours later in a safe house in Togo. The condition? Silence. For nearly 7 months, Kelvin lived under watch, drugged, guarded, and monitored by men who answered only to one voice, Odigwe's. But the mistake they made? They let him read. And what he read were news reports. About Ella's arrest. About the trials. About the mysterious silence vault. About a world that had gone to war over what happened to him. A dead man walking. And then, one night, a weak guard and a rusted window changed everything. Kelvin escaped. He didn't go home. He went underground. Meanwhile, Inspector Clara Mensah had been released from custody after overwhelming public backlash. Though her badge wasn't reinstated yet, her investigation had sparked a special independent panel. She resumed her work with activists and journalists, but there was a problem. Ella Martins had disappeared. 3 days before she was to testify against Odigwe, she was removed from Kirikiri prison by a federal security directive. Her name vanished from the prison log. Clara knew exactly who was behind it. But what she didn't know was that Kelvin had been watching. Kelvin contacted Clara anonymously using a voice modulator and encrypted phone line. "I know where Ella is." Clara froze. "Who are you?" "You already know," he replied. When he agreed to meet, Clara expected a ghost. What she found was a man burning with purpose. Kelvin revealed everything: his captivity, Odigwe's involvement, and how Ella had tried to protect him before the final blow. According to him, she didn't plan to kill me. She wanted to silence me because she was being silenced herself. But what she told me before it all went black is the key to everything. He handed Clara a small black flash drive. Inside were audio recordings made by Ella. Secret ones. Late-night confessions. Memos she saved to remember. But one in particular chilled Clara to her bones. Recording begins. They call him the Chancellor in whispers. The network doesn't stop at West Hill. It runs through 6 universities, 2 ministries, and 3 foreign NGOs. The abuse is systematic. It's currency. I was the bait. Static. Then whispering. I was told if I delivered 15 names, my husband's failing business would be saved. I didn't understand. I just obeyed. Sobs. Then a whisper. But they lied. They always lie. End recording. Clara traced the recordings and files to a codename. The Chancellor's Circle. An elite ring of education officials, business moguls, and foreign philanthropists using scholarship programs and mentorships as covers for exploitation and grooming. Students were trafficked under the guise of exchange programs. Grades were traded for silence. Lives were bought. And at the center of it all, Dr. Matthew Odigwe. He wasn't just the king. He was the architect of an empire built on obedience and blood. Clara, Kelvin, and Deji met in secret to organize what they called Operation Crownbreaker. A digital leak timed to coincide with a global conference where Odigwe was scheduled to receive a humanitarian leadership award. They'd release all files, testimonies, audio recordings, photos of contracts, the names of 41 victims, financial trails between Odigwe and offshore accounts, and the location where Ella was being held. An unofficial detention house operated by private security in Ibadan. They had 48 hours. And then, the unthinkable happened. Just before the leak, Clara's office line rang. No caller ID. A trembling voice whispered, "They found Ella. But it's too late." An hour later, a video surfaced online. Grainy. Shadowed. Ella Martins, bound and bloodied. In the background, a voice. "You thought you were the queen. But queens don't outlive kings." Gunshot. Static. Then black. Despite Ella's execution, Operation Crownbreaker launched. The files flooded social media, news outlets, and international watchdogs. The Chancellor's Circle was exposed. Arrests began. Odigwe denied everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. Clara stood before a sea of cameras and said, "This was never just about one woman, or one death. It was about an entire generation being silenced. And that silence ends today." Kelvin disappeared again, leaving behind only a note. She died trying to undo what she was forced to create. Now it's our turn to finish it. But just as justice seemed within reach, a new message landed in Clara's inbox. A photo. A child. In school uniform. Clutching a West Hill branded tablet. Captioned, "The next generation has already been enrolled." The image attached to the message that had landed in Clara's inbox showed a young boy, confused, holding a school-issued tablet bearing the insignia of West Hill's shadow program. But it wasn't just any child. It was her nephew, Tund, son of her estranged brother, now unknowingly enrolled in a gifted mentorship program run by one of Odigwe's remaining operatives. And in that moment, Clara understood. The circle wasn't dying. It was evolving. The Scholar program had rebranded. Now called Nova Initiative, it operated across rural and urban schools under the guise of digital literacy, with funding from 3 international partners. The model was cleaner, quieter, no more seduction, no more threats. Just control. Data-driven grooming. Algorithmic influence. From mentorship to mind-shaping. A new form of obedience, fed to children through education. The old kings were gone. Now, corporate chancellors reigned. Clara received a flash drive at her doorstep. No note. She plugged it in. A single video played. Kelvin, eyes tired, beard grown, sitting on a bench beside a remote African shoreline. If you're watching this, I didn't make it. The truth isn't bullets. It's memory. Tell them the circle didn't begin at West Hill, and it doesn't end here. It lives wherever ambition corrupts protection, wherever children are currency, wherever silence pays more than truth. But if even one of us remembers, if one of us resists, then the circle doesn't win. The leak had done its damage. Over 30 arrests were made globally. The Chancellor's Circle was dismantled in courtrooms, through international tribunals, and in backroom deals exposed to daylight. Odigwe, once a king, now rotted in solitary confinement. Convicted for conspiracy, human trafficking, corruption, obstruction, and multiple counts of accessory to murder. He tried to end his life twice. He failed. He now sat, silent, in a windowless cell. The world had forgotten his power, but he had not. Ella Martins remained a name no one could agree on. Villain, victim, which, witness. In the official record, she was listed as conflicted perpetrator turned whistleblower who died under suspicious circumstances before testifying. But her recordings, her broken whispers, became the core of curriculum reform, mental health awareness campaigns, and an annual Student Protection Act memorial observance across Nigeria's universities. She was no hero, but she forced a reckoning. And maybe that was enough. Clara never returned to the force. Instead, she founded the 42nd Child Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to identifying and intervening in exploitative academic mentorship programs across Africa. The number 42 now symbolized the unknown victims. The ones never named. The ones buried in silence. Every year, on the day Kelvin was presumed dead, Clara lights 42 candles on the college steps at West Hill, now an abandoned shell. Not for him, but for them. They thought it was over. They thought exposing the circle would end the darkness. But a man in Berlin opens a laptop with a familiar logo. A professor in Johannesburg emails a private mentee selection form. A child in Kano receives a scholarship offer with no visible sponsor. The circle had been broken, but its shadow still moved. The greatest lie we tell ourselves is that evil wears a name badge. But it doesn't. It wears robes, titles, smiles, and funding. This wasn't just a story of corruption. It was a story of how we failed our children, and how a handful of them fought back. Ella, Kelvin, Deji, the 41, and the 42 whose name we'll never know. The circle doesn't end with exposure. It ends when we stop forgetting. Silence is consent. Memory is resistance. Tell the story again.